It's time for another episode.
Yay.
Welcome back. This week we're going to talk about stories from the doors.
Great.
What's been going on? I think it was something we were just discussing before the podcast that I think it's an interesting way to let other people know who's listening what people are actually saying on the doors.
Yeah.
Because obviously when you're knocking around, you've got people from all over the spectrum, haven't you? So we've got voters, whether they be Conservative, Lib Dem, Labour, Green, smaller parties, Reform, or people who don't vote, people who've never voted.
Yeah.
So
young voters,
of course,
first-time voters.
Yeah, the actual real people demographic versus the political demographic.
Yeah.
So what's been going on?
Well,
give me the gossip.
Give you some doorstep stories. This is a big part of my life, so it makes sense. So I've door knocked 17,500 people now.
Yeah,
which is a huge achievement for me.
Well, that's more than your initial target, right?
Yes, exactly. So my initial target was 15,000. That was within the expectation of a May election. Of course, we're going past that date now. So I did meet my target of 15,000 at the end of March, which was what I hoped to do. I guess I don't really know. I guess my target now is 20 to 25,000.
Why do you keep moving the goalposts?
Depends when the election is again, doesn't it? And we're never quite sure. So I guess if it's an October election, I'll probably do 25,000. It is still challenging. It requires so much physical and mental and emotional energy to door knock. I can't emphasize that enough. Like I have to, even if I don't feel 100%, I still on some days are like, no, I have to go. I can do about 200 doors a day. I've done all over the constituency now, except Shepton. Shepton, I'm coming soon. So yeah, it's been enlightening. And I thought I knew a lot before I started doing door knocking, but I realised I didn't know much at all, or I knew a bit, but I didn't really know how people were thinking and feeling across the board, like you say, with all those different types of voters. And now I feel like I've got a very good understanding. And it's encouraging and challenging all at the same time. So I can definitely tell you some stories. So like I was door knocking in Kingston Seymour the other day. This was quite a funny experience. And some people like bend out their window at the top, and like decide whether they want to talk to you or not. And she was like, what do you want? And I was like, well, my name's Abby and I'm running as an independent in the next general election. She went, I'll be right down. And I was like, okay. So she comes down, opens the door and she's like, I am a hardcore Labour voter, so you're going to have to tell me something really special for me to even consider voting for you. And I was like, you don't have a Labour candidate? And she was like, oh, that's a pretty good reason. And I'm like, it's not a bad reason. Like, Labour Party have said that this is a non-priority area for them. Okay. So they haven't brought a candidate forward yet. They will put one in. This is what I say to people on the door. They will put one in, but it's probably going to be somebody from London or out of the area who doesn't really understand our local issues or the constituency needs. So they will just toe the party line. Yeah.
It's an interesting non-priority area.
Yeah, I don't know why. Well, because it's a Conservative stronghold historically. So I do feel sorry for Labour voters in this area, because they say to me on the door repeatedly, I'm a Labour voter, but there's no point in voting Labour here. And it's like, well, yes, it makes it even more difficult when you don't even have a candidate, because I do think if you had a good candidate who was running and put themselves out there, people might start to believe in that person and they could get behind them. But because our political parties don't exist in that way and we don't ever really get behind a person, we just get behind a party. It's very hard to do that. So I door knocked somebody else this week who, they were a couple actually, and she answered the door and she was very engaged with what I was doing, and she called her husband and he sort of came to the door and he was like, look, I've decided who I'm voting for. I'm voting for Labour. And I was like, but you don't actually have a candidate. And he was like, I'm still voting for Labour. And off he went. And it was like, so I had continued talking to her, and it was like, well, that's very difficult because you're just voting on a value system or a set of ideas, and they could put anybody in here. And for me, that's a bit of a worry because this is our MP. This is somebody who's going to represent us. and we don't even know who that person is for the Labour Party at the moment. And she really understood what I was saying. And so there's a whole narrative around voting for the person rather than the party.
And that's something I know that we're trying to explore more with the campaign, because I know in the past that I voted blanketly just for the party.
Yeah.
Because desperation of like wanting something to change, or, you know, that more so like a tactical vote probably. But why is it important to vote for the person, not the party?
I think for that very reason, because it is that person who's representing you. And if you have a local issue, you know, you get to the small print at the bottom and it's like, contact your local MP. And if you've got a local MP who don't know anything about the constituency and just cares about what their party's saying in London, you're going to struggle.
Yeah. And it's a value system as well, because you know that if you're voting for the person, track record is really helpful. Maybe like past voting history, or even what they've done in their own community.
Yeah.
What they've like achieved kind of gives you an idea of what they're going to be able to do in the future.
Yeah.
It's like actions speak louder than words. You know, someone can promise that they're going to do something, but hang on a minute, they've not done that to date. So how likely is that?
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I think all of that is true. And I have had me and Jake were in Cheddar the other week, and we had a very challenging conversation with somebody who was basically getting his own voting history and guilt around that out onto me as an individual. So he's like, you know, I voted this way. I now don't believe in it any longer. But what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about all these things? And it's like, well, like I kind of need to let you go through this process to get your own guilt out. But I am just an independent, and the reason I'm stepping up now is because it's become such a mess.
Yeah.
That we have to do something differently because of the system that you have bought into your whole life wholeheartedly.
And that's where you're talking about the voting, the guilt of voting history.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think there is a bit of guilt of voting history going around now, because there are so many people who I've door knocked, people in their 80s, 90s, I'm talking hundreds of people, who have said to me, I've always voted Conservative, but this time I just cannot. So when people say to me on the door, you know, this is a Conservative stronghold, like you're going to have trouble convincing Conservative voters to vote any other way, I'm like, but you haven't door knocked 17,500 people, and I have, and I know what people are saying.
It's an interesting thing as well, because I feel like that's my catchphrase. I always say that's an interesting thing. Because
I'll notice it now that you said that. Oh, I said it again.
But it is an interesting thing that voters can have a strong allegiance to a party.
Yeah.
And people can have a tendency to vote. Something might happen, they go, I'm not sure on that, but doubling down, I'll put my chips in. I need this to kind of work. So is that kind of come up on the doors, and like how do you respond to that?
I think people are even further beyond that now.
Yeah.
So I think maybe in the last election they felt like that, you know, Boris, he can deliver what he's saying he's going to deliver, but this time people are like, no chance.
So
and I'm talking about people who've got a long voting history of voting the same way.
Yeah.
And so when people say to me, other people say on the door, like, we must get the Conservatives out. We must vote tactically to get the Conservatives out. I'm like, you've actually got no worries there, because they are gone. They're gone. From what I have learned on the door, this is not my own narrative. This is just what I've learned on the door. They are gone anyway. So you're actually free to vote how you want to this time.
What an amazing opportunity. I love it.
Yeah, I think it is quite liberating. But of course, because people are in their silos, or they're just talking with their group of 4 or 5 people friends down the pub, they don't know that that's perpetuated out. But that really is the narrative across the board, that hardcore Conservative voters, of which my parents are included, will not vote Conservative this time.
It's quite an interesting time. Again, interesting.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time. I would say this is a moment in history that will be marked in the sand as a change in our British politics forever. Because
obviously within this constituency, it's had a long history of Conservative representation, right?
Yes. It was 87 years, and then Tessa Munt from the Lib Dems took it in 2010 to 2015. So she broke that reign. And, you know, tremendous respect for her for getting in on that election. And she was a great constituent MP. I hear good things about her as a constituent MP on the door. But again, you won't, Conservative voters, for some reason, find it very difficult to vote for the Liberal Democrats.
Interesting.
And there is a bit of a disharmony on the doors about the coalition between 2010 and 2015.
Yeah.
So there are some Lib Dem voters who feel displaced also because they put their trust and faith in the Lib Dems in 2010 and felt let down.
Yeah, so I suppose there's an opportunity here, like you're saying, people can actually vote for who they want to without any like tactical voting, anything like that.
Yeah. There's another thing that happens on the door where people they're so into their stance of wherever they lie that they won't even engage in a conversation with you. So I had that this week as well, where a lady answered the door and she was like, I know who I'm voting for. And I was like, oh, okay, that's great. This is just information for you though, to help you make an informed decision. And just to let you know, there is no Conservative candidate at the moment because James Heappey 3 weeks ago said he wasn't running. And there is no Labour candidate either because the Labour Party have said, I didn't actually say all that, she didn't give me time, but the Labour Party have deemed it not a priority area. I just said there's no Labour or Conservative candidate. And she went, I do know, I've got a politics degree. And I was like, I'm not sure how that's relevant to the Labour Party and the Conservative Party not having a candidate, but okay, that's fine. And she's basically, and I mentioned this story to one of her neighbours a bit further on, and he was like, you would have thought somebody with a politics degree would actually want to engage in a conversation with somebody who's knocking on their door saying that they're running and I was like, yeah, it's a good point. But people get very anxious about maybe how they vote or they have voted previously, and they, like you said before, they kind of stick hard with that, which I think is true for some Lib Dem voters. I'm not sure it's true of the Conservative voters this time.
That's interesting because there's an idea, again, maybe it's just from a recently historical perspective within the last few years, where we've how many prime ministers have we had in the last?
Oh, let's tot them up. Since when? Theresa?
I want to say, 5 years.
5 years.
This is a test for you.
Yeah, okay. Theresa May, obviously. Then it went to Boris, Liz, Rishi. So we've had 4. And then if you want to include David Cameron, that's 5.
He's allowed in. He was there as well.
And he's back in now, for sure.
It feels like it's been going on for such a long time. And I think it's just a very condensed... That theoretically should have taken about 12 years.
Yeah.
Give or take. But condensed to that small amount of time.
Yeah, it's caused a lot of anxiety, definitely, on the door. And I think this is why Conservative voters are like, I just can't this time. It's not recognising that we've been through Brexit and the pandemic, which have obviously been very significant. I think it's been their conduct throughout that and the disintegration of the party itself. And
so what are people's kind of thoughts on the doors about the conduct of the Conservatives?
I think the conduct in Parliament people are watching are like, it's just not acceptable. And you look at polls again and people are saying that there has been so little faith now in the whole structure of our politicians. And I think people are really struggling with that. And I think turnout in this election will be low across the board because of that. But I think, I was having a chat with somebody on the phone today who was really promoting an independent movement across the country. And he was sort of saying, if we choose not to vote in this election, we are actually endorsing those behaviours because those people will still get in. It doesn't matter if 40% turnout or 80% turnout, the 40% will carry the vote for those people to get in. So we're still endorsing the behaviours of those politicians where there is so much...
Yeah, by not engaging with something, it's like silence is actually condoning behaviour. We need to be speaking out against it. Yeah.
Well, one of my favourite, I go door knocking with my husband as well sometimes. And one of the things we say on the door is like, if you don't vote or if you vote for one of the political parties, you are actually endorsing those behaviours. If you don't want to endorse those behaviours, you need to think about a different way of voting.
Yeah.
But that doesn't include not voting because you're still endorsing those behaviours.
And so we've kind of talked about the way that people are feeling about other parties on the doors. How are people feeling about you? What's the reception?
Well, I'm in such a privileged position because I think if I was a conservative knocking, I would have stopped knocking by now because it would be so difficult.
Yeah.
And I don't actually know of any of the other political parties who are door knocking, but because I'm an independent, people will talk to me in a positive way. And actually, the feedback I have over and over again is, wow, that's so refreshing. That's very clear thinking. I really like it. No one's ever done anything like this before. I can really get behind. And you're a woman. They love that. You're a woman and you're going to make history. And I love all of that. And a lot of people actually say there and then on the door, I'm definitely going to vote for you. I didn't know how I was going to vote. Thank goodness you knocked on my door.
Yeah.
So I get that a lot. And that's very encouraging. That helps me to door knock the 17,500 people. If I didn't get those sorts of responses, it would be very difficult.
So I think we talked a little bit about maybe some quite interesting interactions you've had with people where they've maybe not been so receptive.
Yeah.
So it'd be great to hear some stories about, like where people, whether you can talk a little bit more in detail how that's kind of helped you potentially carry on as well, because it must be quite motivating.
Yeah, it is a huge motivator. So back along, I think it was in January, I was door knocking in a small village and the guy opened the door and he was like, he was so excited. He was like, "You're here." And I was like, "I'm here." I was like, "Have I met you?" Because I've met a lot of people. Yeah. And he was like, No. And then he was like, Sally, his wife, come, she's here. And he was like, my friend in the next village was telling me all about you, and now you're here, you're door knocking. He was like, come in, but don't come in because you've got a lot of doors to knock, but come in because I really want to talk to you. So I was like, it's fine, I can come in. So I came in and they gave me a coffee and we had a little chat, and they were just so excited that I existed, I think, in the world, but also that I had then knocked on their door. Yeah. And it was such a lovely moment because it was like, okay, it really feels like it's starting to move now. Like it's not all in vain. My door knocking is starting to pay off. Like my visits to all of the parish councils is actually starting to mean something. So my, 14, 15 months that I've been working on this now is actually starting to mean something.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And it's really amazing to see we've had like a lot of really generous donations to the campaign as well. So people are really feeling it and want to get involved as well.
Totally. Like the hoodie that you're wearing.
Yeah, the T-shirts, the hoodies.
Well, you can buy those, but we have like 150 people who already have one of those. And we had donations. I had an email this week from somebody who was like, I didn't meet you on the door. You gave your leaflet to my partner who gave it to me, and I've got 2 days a week that I can give to the campaign. Yeah. Tell me what you want me to do. And it's like that. I mean, that's so meaningful because I can't imagine those people ever volunteering their time and money into, maybe they do, I don't know, I've never experienced it myself.
I think the difference that I can see is that you are an individual essentially, so you don't have the support of other parties and then you placing yourself within that and the support that already exists. This support that you're building up now is something that you're building up through the campaign work we're doing, but by you going to the doors and being yourself. So this is grassroots, and we're starting from zero. Yeah. All on a shoestring.
Yeah.
Everything's done by either the very generous donations that we've already received.
In my front room for the podcast.
Yeah. Just volunteer work.
I love it when Peter Welsh came the other day, the Green candidate, and he was like, "Oh, I thought you had a studio or something." I was like, "No, it's just my front room. Sorry."
But this is another interesting. Maybe we can talk a little bit about this as well, because the people that we have working on the campaign and the people that I think you have kind of fostered a culture around it, is identifying people's skills and engaging with them, and it's getting people who are good at what they do, like. Shout out to Jake behind the camera, who does all our editing. Finding people with skills and getting them involved. Yeah. And I think that's a really powerful statement.
Yeah, and that's really important to me because I've done volunteer work and work before where I haven't enjoyed it and I felt obliged to do it. I don't want anybody to feel like that on the campaign. So I want people to do what they enjoy doing, give the time that they've got. All of those things are really important to me. So, I think we have managed to build up a team where people are doing things that they really enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doing. And of course, we're now really dependent on Jake, aren't we?
Well, who's not? Who isn't? And I think people getting involved on the doors as well, I think is a really powerful message. Someone saying they want to donate 2 days a week of their time.
Time is the most valuable resource.
The most valuable. And
Yeah.
I think that shows dedication and belief
Yeah.
in kind of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I think it's pushed it to the next level. So it's not out of that desperation, like we've talked about lots of getting another party out. It's more like, oh wow, you're presenting something that we can actually believe in and that we can actually get behind. And I think that is really exciting for people. And there is something about the British mentality of grassroots underdog. You know, like Rocky.
we
the
love an
film.
underdog.
Love an underdog.
Yeah, who doesn't love an underdog?
I mean, there's something really exciting about that.
Yeah.
So when I say to people on the door, you know, I'd be the first female independent ever elected to Parliament, they're like, say no more. That's amazing. I love that. That's so exciting. And that's before I've even said, you know, I would use my platform to do this. They're like, I'm not interested about what you use it for. I'm just interested that you are going to achieve that.
Yeah, and I think
like,
people are really excited to be a part of that as well.
Yes.
And I think it really says like a statement about what people want to get involved in.
Yeah.
And it's different as well, because the answer that we're kind of presenting on this campaign, we've got a different solution versus just get the other guys out.
Yeah. Yeah, that people can get excited about. And I always feel really privileged when people understand it straight away and get behind it straight away. And I don't have to do, because it is quite a big thing that we're trying to explain to people. So I always feel really grateful when people just
absolutely
get it.
It's a big, almost paradigm shift in the way that politics can work.
Yeah.
And I think, again, we're kind of taking our time to break it down. And I think, obviously, a lot of the work you've been doing is talking and listening on the doors that kind of informs the approach.
Yeah, I think, you know, so much on the doors, you've got these little signs saying the big hand and no canvassing, no... I always knock on all those doors because I'm a bit cheeky like that. And actually what I found with those people is, because I say, look, first of all, I acknowledge the sign. I'm, you know, I've acknowledged your sign. You may not want this, but my name is Abby and I'm running as an independent in the next general election. And then their responses are always really positive. It's like, oh, that's quite interesting. Yeah, I'll take that. Now, some of them want to chat, some of them don't. And I never push people. And I've never been canvassed myself, so I don't know what it's like.
Oh, interesting.
No one's ever knocked on my door, and I've never engaged with somebody. But I have a feeling, especially from some stories Jake has told me about at his college, with, you know, politicians who go and canvass there, is that they're quite pushy. And if you don't agree with their narrative, then they sort of are a bit aggressive with you, maybe.
Yeah.
And so I can understand those signs from that point of view, but I'm only, you know, challenging to people who are very challenging to me. I never push people more past what they're comfortable with.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting point in here as well, is the challenging people on their views and people challenging you on your views is actually a really healthy way to find common ground and to understand people, because it's not a one-way thing where you're going to doors and going, you need to vote for me because otherwise X, Y, and Z is going to happen.
Yeah.
And this should be your option.
Yeah.
You can go in and talk about, I've heard you go on the doors and talk about a wide variety of different things. I didn't think we were going to get to there in that conversation. But you can hold the conversation and also provide solutions. And every time I see you come away from the door, people more often than not will go, okay, interesting. And I think to provoke or promote a conversation where people are thinking about things is really powerful.
It's so good. I mean, when me and Peter were door knocking in Axbridge the other day, we were on the main drag and he was chatting to somebody. Now this guy was like totally dismissive. It wasn't actually me, it was Peter who was talking to him, and he was very you can get a lot of disrespect on the door. He was quite disrespectful, very dismissive, was like, she hasn't got a hope, blah 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 blah, whatever. Now Peter pushed him quite a bit, and then after a 5-10 minute chat, was quite a long chat, came away. Now we did the rest of Axbridge door knocking because this was in the morning, and in the afternoon we happened to be walking back down that same road and we bumped into this chap, and he had a full-on smiley face because we were both there together, and he was like, I told my son about you, he was really excited, and you could just tell this guy had changed his demeanour from somebody who was quite cynical and dismissive and disrespectful to somebody who was hopeful, excited, totally on board with what we were doing. And I just thought, that's interesting. So all the people I have door knocked who have presented those same behaviours to me, so disrespectful, dismissive, cynical, what happens to them in the 2 or 3 hours following that I have left them in their own thought process?
Yeah, plant that seed.
It's planted then, and then who knows what journey they go on afterwards. And I just found that it was such a good illustration of that process that happened with him.
And how long was that period?
5-6 hours.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's how someone's mindset, and we're all like this. No one's, we've got our kind of ideas, and we can feel attacked, and we can feel defensive, and like we need to defend our position. And it's can be very hard to be open and to listen and receive straight away.
Yeah.
But it's really impressive that someone can do that within that short amount of time as well. Like, what a flip.
Totally. And it makes me think about, the lady who was like, I've studied politics. It was like, she was so anxious that I would challenge her own thought process. She was going to cling on so tightly to it. She didn't even want the information. She was like, this is all I've got here, and you're challenging it, and I can't even face you challenging it. So she was just like pushing it away. But that has happened a number of times where I had door knocked somebody and I felt it's been a negative interaction, but then they know somebody who then comes back to me and was like, they're absolutely raving about you. And I'm like, well, that wasn't my memory of what happened that day. But so it is interesting. It's really interesting.
It's great to have these conversations because it just instills my my positive attitude again to what we're doing. And I think these stories are really important to hear. The challenging ones, what people are feeling like on the doors, but then also they're like warm reception. And again, I think something that's really great about the way you're campaigning is you're not saying you are the choice. I've heard you say to people, I'm not trying to get your vote. You vote. I think it's really important that you vote for whoever you believe in.
Yeah.
And that gives people like an autonomy and like a sense of power that maybe they haven't had politically before.
I think that's true. What is important to me is that I try and give them as much information that they need as possible to make that informed choice. That's important to me. But yes, after you've had that, please vote how you want to vote.
I think it's great. And I think that's probably a great way to end this podcast as well. I would suggest to people, again, back to the really amazing support that we're getting, to the people that you're reaching out to on the doors that want to be involved in the campaign. Really amazing support for the entire ethos of kind of what we're doing. We're getting some really great responses from our email subscription.
Yeah.
So thank you to anyone who's already on that. And if anyone wants to join as well, just head straight to the website.
Yeah.
We're doing lots of really exciting stuff. And now that the weather's getting warmer as well, I imagine we're going to go out a little bit more as well. So I hope everyone's enjoying the weather. And join us next time.